We're back again.
We are indeed, Pete. It's an absolute pleasure to see you
Pleasure
again.
to see you too, Saul.
I don't know what time of the series this is, but
I have no idea.
We've been here a long time.
Yeah.
Next one, hazards. Now, Clearview Intelligence products must prevent a lot of hazards on the roads and everywhere in infrastructure. Got a few questions around it. How does Clearview Intelligence identify common hazards on roads, such as like poor visibility and sudden traffic changes?
Simple answer to that is we probably don't. Actually, it's normally our customers that come to us and said, we've identified a cluster site, or we've identified a hazard, or we think there's a hazard. What can you do to help us?
Yeah.
We can help them with data, so we can help them to understand what is happening, and that can be either just measuring the amount of traffic, measuring the speed of the traffic. We've got a platform, I've mentioned it on one of the previous podcasts, Insight.
Yeah.
There's another part of Insight which is called the Journey Time System. So the Journey Time System is a kind of interesting product in that there's no technology at the side of the road, but we can use that to identify the journey time of vehicles along pretty much any stretch of road anywhere, pretty much in the world, to be honest, but focusing here on the UK. So we've, as an example, deployed a scheme where National Highways were worried about queuing traffic. This was up near Lincolnshire, and they were worried that traffic was getting to this particular junction off this dual carriageway and wasn't clearing the junction, so it started to queue back up the main carriageway. Yeah. And it was going to be very, very expensive to put some detection technology in. You'll be aware, but maybe the listeners won't be aware. Putting stuff in the road can be very expensive. You've got to shut the road. You've got to have traffic management, all of these things. And they were trying to find, a straightforward solution to that particular hazard that they were aware of. So we used our journey time system and just looked at that over the course of a few weeks, how the journey time changed, and we found that actually when traffic started to queue in that near side lane, it impacted the overall journey time of everybody going through there. So they already had a sign there that hadn't been used for years, so we basically connected our journey time system up to that sign, and once the journey time went over a certain level, we started to flash the sign to warn approaching vehicles that there was queuing traffic ahead.
Yeah, of course.
So that was an unusual one, that they thought there was a problem. We analysed it using the journey time platform, but then also delivered that solution without installing anything at the side of the road. So that's a kind of unique solution. This journey time system doesn't need any technology at the side of the road. It uses crowdsourced data. So it monitors, we collect this kind of commercially available data, and we just make it very easy for somebody to use. Often, and I'm going off a little bit here, but hey,
please do.
Often a local authority will use it for kind of before and after analysis. So if they think they've got an issue, whatever that issue happens to be, they can measure the journey time before they do anything to see what the traffic flows are like around that area or along that road or through that traffic signal junction. Then they do whatever it is they're going to do, whether it's changing the road markings, whether it's putting some civil engineering in, whether it's changing the phasing of the traffic signals. But then they can run the same kind of survey again afterwards and see what the impact has been on the journey time. So they're collecting this data, they're understanding what's happening, and then they can verify that what they've done has made a difference. Of course. And we can do that without putting any technology there. We just monitor this crowdsourced data, and we can make it very easy for them to be able to use. So that's kind of a slightly unusual thing. Probably the more standard kind of hazard detection stuff is really around the local authority or the customer will detect that they've got some issue in an area. I was at a site a little while ago where this particular area was on a downhill stretch of road, quite a steep downhill, but then the road curved really. It was almost like a hairpin bend. And the local authority was having problems because the cars kept going straight on at this bend and ended up in the garden of this house that was on the corner. And clearly the homeowner was really quite upset about the fact that they're constantly getting their front wall knocked down and all the rest of it. So in that instance, it was about how can we improve the visibility of the bend. So in that instance, we talked to the local authority about putting our solar road studs around the edge of the bend. So as the vehicles are coming down, they start to see our solar road studs, which are visible from much further away than a traditional road stud.
Yeah.
But they could see them going round the bend. Even if their headlights weren't illuminating them as they went around the bend, because they're solar powered, they could see the bend. So as they're coming down the hill, the drivers could see this bend and they kind of negotiate it much more safely. And I'm glad to say nobody's ended up in the garden of this house anymore. So
not another wall to build.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, sometimes these schemes are actually very small. This was only a little section of road, but it was important. Potentially there could be casualties there could be fatalities there if it went horribly wrong. And it's I actually feel very proud that we've got these quite simple little products. A little solar powered road stud, but it can make a huge difference to the safety of what looks like a safe stretch of road. But in certain circumstances, every now and then things go wrong, and we can stop that happening.
Of course, you say obviously mostly customers come to us and we sort of deal with their problems and the different hazards that they have. With sort of different like weather conditions, like rain, fog, does that influence the design and the implementation of how Clearview would go about designing sort of what need for the hazard? Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of two parts to that. One is, first of all, we've got to detect whatever the hazard might be. Now, the one I just mentioned about the solar studs, that's kind of almost a passive system. It's doing nothing. It's when it gets dark, the studs illuminate and it works, and then during the day they go off. But often our systems use some form of detection to detect the hazard. Certain types of detection work better than others in poor weather conditions. So, for instance, if you're using a video-based solution and you're trying to detect a hazard, that might not be great in snow or in heavy rain or whatever. So sometimes you have to pick the type of detection depending on what the potential hazards are at the time. And often these things aren't easy to it's not a one size fits all. You can't always say this is always the best solution. And I think that's perhaps our strength, in that we have a wide range of products that we can manufacture and we make, and most of our products are, I'm glad to say, are made here in the UK, but we can also use third-party products. So we're kind of agnostic in that respect. If a customer came to us and said, we've got this particular challenge we're trying to overcome, we've got almost like a big kit bag, and we can say, well, you could use this, you could use that, or actually, you know what, this is a really good solution for that. So I think it's the breadth of our offering, I think, is one of the strengths that we have, is that if I'm having a conversation with you, it almost doesn't matter what your challenge is. The likelihood is we've done something like it before, and we've either got our own product or we've got a third-party product that we can use that will kind of give us the information or the metrics or the detection or whatever it is we need to be able to manage that. And that's from kind of the detection side of things, but also from the hazard notification. So sometimes we'll use I've talked about our IRS2s that are hardwired road studs. So sometimes we'll use these to identify a hazard, but sometimes it's a message sign at the side of the road, a vehicle activated sign or a variable message sign. So we've got partnerships with lots of organisations where, again, it's not one size fits all. Sometimes it's a very simple little sign. Sometimes you need a sign that can show multiple different messages. Sometimes it has what we call the wigwags, the flashing amber lights. Sometimes it doesn't have that. So there's lots of different solutions, and it kind of depends on what's your problem, and let me help you fix it.
Of course.
We don't just peddle out the same solution to everybody. Each of these solutions tends to be very bespoke.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your answer, Pete. It sounds like we can fix pretty much anything that needs hazard-wise on the road.
Hopefully so, yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you back on our podcast. Thank you very much, Pete.
Good to see you again.
You too.